We're talking uncomfortable sell-high dynasty options right here on Dynasty Life. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. I'm Theo Gremminger, joined today by my good friend Alan Sislowski of RotoWire. Alan, we're talking about some players where in the YouTube comments, people are going to get a little bit heated. Every time we talk about sell-high options, there's people who think it's ridiculous that we'd even suggest putting this player on the open market. Foundational pieces to certain Dynasty rosters, all completely locked-in starters and household names in Dynasty. And we're going to reference some keep, trade, cut prices with these players, but let's first off talk about the timing of trades, where this is a great time of year to get some trades done because we're all active with rookie drafts.
Well, first of all, I take offense that you would say that we're good friends and not great friends. Okay?
Sorry, so I apologize. I apologize.
That already, you've downgraded our friendship. But that aside, yeah, I mean, a lot of times I have the same frustration that you said that your YouTube commenters will have. Like, I start yelling at the podcast of, what an idiot, this would never get done in my league, I would never do this. So I'll say first and foremost, these are things that I'm doing in my leagues. I don't even advise you to do them in your leagues. I'm not here to give advice. I'm here to tell you, Theo Gremminger, what I'm doing. And the reason right now it's time to make some uncomfortable sells in Dynasty Fantasy Football is because everyone that doesn't pay attention is paying attention because those rookie drafts are going off. My phone is pinging every 2 seconds with this pick was made. I can't believe this guy took this player this high. So when everyone's engaged, this is the time to get that slot machine adrenaline going and make some of these uncomfortable Dynasty sells.
Yeah, and it's sort of the optimism of the offseason where people have rookie picks. They have an opportunity to sort of reshape their roster, and they might be more open-minded to like an earth-shattering type deal that has huge ramifications, not only for their own roster, the manager they're trading with, but the league as a whole. Today, I saw a trade go down in a single quarterback high-stakes league that I'm not in, where it was Carnell Tate and Malik Neighbors traded for Bijan Robinson and Terry McLaurin. So you're seeing like massive trades go down. I talked about some of them on my previous show. You can find it right here on Fantasy Points Dynasty YouTube. Talked about a couple of trades that I did during rookie drafts, as well as a trade that I turned down, Alan, which is haunting me to this day. And the YouTube commenters are already coming out with the pitchforks for that one. So we're going to talk about it today. You've got a list of guys. I've got a list of guys. Let's talk about your first player who's always in the news, George Pickens. And this is a difficult player to discuss because we did see the massive breakthrough season last year where he averaged like 18 points per game. His first year in Dallas, he's still got youth on his side, up to wide receiver 11 in keep, trade, cut, which is about where I have him ranked in my Dynasty wide receiver rankings. I might have Pickens even a spot higher than that. I was a little, not angry, but a little surprised he's how you'd want to start it out with. Why don't you share your thoughts with Pickens?
Yeah, I mean, George Pickens, I think we're at the point with George Pickens where anything you read about him in the news, you're probably going to believe, right? He's one of the highest upside players. He can finish as like the wide receiver 1 overall, but he could also crater at any moment. So he's an unstable asset. He's cryptocurrency, Theo Gremminger, okay? So you have this asset, and it's like he's ascending. He's a top 12 wide receiver in the Dynasty rankings, and I think even in the redraft rankings as well. And I think that he is best used, this is how I'm going to use him in my leagues, as a skeleton key to break in to the elite tier. So he's a sell not because he's a declining asset and let's get out before like the complete bottom falls out, even though that is in play. But the reason I'm selling him is that he's a desired asset, and in my brain, there's a very good, more chance than not, that he's not going to be ranked as wide receiver 11 at this time next year. Now, again, he could be. He's got the upside, but it's easier to see him fall back into the pack a little bit here. He had his career year with Dallas. CeeDee Lamb probably is, still the dominant guy on that team, although I've seen a lot of smart fantasy analysis that talks about how that may not be when they're both on the field. So if I can use him to get into Puka, to get to that JSN tier, to get up to Jamar Chase, I want to explore those possibilities because too many times we see sell a falling knife. I think if there's a perception that someone like Pickens is on the way up and could even having more upside, we got to use him to try to vault ourselves. And also, how many times? I mean, it has happened, but it's a rare occurrence, Theo, when we have 2 wide receivers on the same team that are top 12 receivers. Now, like I said, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams both did it, right, in recent history. I mean, there's a list of them, but it's not a long list.
It's interesting because your argument is the CeeDee Lamb is going to come back and sort of be the dominant alpha. Therefore, Pickens is most likely the second leading scorer among the wide receivers in Dallas if everything works out and he's a Dallas Cowboy this year, which I think they'll work out. I think everything's going to get kind of there. I think it's interesting with Pickens. We saw a trade. We're sourcing data from Dynasty Data Labs. So we saw a trade go down where we talk about skeleton key. We saw George Pickens and Ladd McConkey in a 2-for-1 deal for Jamar Chase. I think I'm on the Chase side there, so I'd agree with you. On the flip side, I've made a deal where I've traded Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I think it was the 108, and I got back the 111 George Pickens, Kyron Williams, Blake Corum. So I acquired Pickens in that deal, and I feel like that one I was willing to do. And this was a couple of weeks ago where 108 obviously had a little bit more room to run than the 111, the way it sort of shook out post-NFL draft. This was pre-NFL draft. So I can see it both ways. I think Pickens is sort of it's a dangerous player to sell, but you're right. I mean, this might be the cleanest and the highest ranked he could be. I do think there's a chance it burns you. If George Pickens starts the year out and CeeDee Lamb and him are playing side by side, and I get 6 weeks of George Pickens outperforming CeeDee Lamb once again, the flip has happened, Alan. That's all I need is 6 weeks there. If I get a 17-point-per-game start from Pickens, and let's say 14.5 point per game for CeeDee Lamb, where he'd still be a wide receiver 15 level guy, Pickens would in turn be a wide receiver 6 level guy, then the flip has happened because of the age disparity, and people say CeeDee Lamb has sort of settled in. People like Scott Barrett, people like yourself, are assuming that it's going to be CeeDee Lamb bouncing back, but
that's not bad company to be in. I'll stand on the same side of the room as Scott Barrett anytime, man.
Yeah, and I'll go a little bit battle with you guys. I'm into both, but I think CeeDee Lamb. I mean, we could have put CeeDee Lamb in this discussion as well. CeeDee Lamb's 27 years old. He's more of a blue chip stock, whereas George Pickens is a stock that like more than doubled in price last year. Maybe like an AI stock or something.
He's
like
Claude
that.
Code. He's Claude.
Yeah, AI George Pickens.
Anthropic.
So let us know in the chat what you're doing with George Pickens, and do you agree with the wide receiver 11 price? I think it's appropriately priced player and probably a little bit more of a hold for me. Alan is open-minded to selling. Let us know what you would sell George Pickens for.
Hey, Theo. Theo, the reason that, again, the price is appropriate on George Pickens. The mindset to sell is, do you think it's going to stay? I used the cryptocurrency reference before, analogy. It's because when it hits a certain price, where do you believe the market's going to go? I'm going to make the bet that it's going to go down. But you know what happens when you sell Bitcoin, when you sell any of this stuff, you could get screwed at any point. He's a volatile asset. I love that you called CD a blue chip. That's stable. You know what you're getting. The floor was last year. He's like, what? I mean, you still got an every week starter. So this is an uncomfortable sell. I didn't come here saying I'm selling Devontae Adams at 34 years old. I didn't come here saying I'm selling Mike Evans on his last hurrah. I'm coming in here, putting it on the table, Theo, and I'm making a dangerous play because I'm swinging to try to win a title this year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I do think Pickens has more room to run upwards, whereas CeeDee Lamb, did we see his last wide receiver 1 overall challenge?
Yeah. This is dangerous.
We might have. It's definitely a tenuous one. Certainly, they're both really strong players for you to have, but I think Pickens has a wider range of outcomes. Like, a downside for CeeDee Lamb is just that he ages gracefully, and you see his price tag go from like wide receiver 7 to wide receiver 10 to wide receiver 11, down to wide receiver 15.
Larry
Maybe
Fitzgerald.
He just settles. Larry Fitzgerald, that's a great one, where he can give you wide receiver 1 season at like age 30. George Pickens, it could go either way. I could see him having a top 3 wide receiver season in a year from now, or I could see him on a worse situation than Dallas. I think there's a lot. It's very tenuous. I'll say my first player to discuss selling, and also this is one that gets the people going, Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey is such an interesting player because he steamed up so highly as a rookie. We had such a window to sell, but it was like greed in the marketplace where Ladd McConkey set the all-time record for receiving yardage in an NFL playoff game, had that remarkable game against the Houston Texans when the Chargers lost. He was like a rocket ship to the moon. The guy averaged 15 points per game as a rookie, a little bit overshadowed that year because Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. both outscored him. But like Ladd McConkey was a wide receiver 1 almost every season. I think he was like wide receiver 13 that year in points per game. Then we get this like off season of optimism where McConkey's going to be that edge pick in the second round that could push you over the top. There was a lot of conversations of like A.J. Brown versus McConkey, Jackson Smith and Jigba versus McConkey. But McConkey was gone by the 2-3 turn. And Dynasty, he was like a locked-in wide receiver 1. Then the season starts, and he's getting out-targeted by not only Keenan Allen, but also Quentin Johnston. Then Ladd McConkey has a mid-season bump where he starts scoring, and then Allen, it goes away. The last 7 games of the season, really, really poor production, almost unusable for about 4 out of those 7 games, and did nothing in the NFL playoffs. So Ladd McConkey, to me, is one where I think in most seasons, people would look at that profile and say, we overrated it. We need to get this guy ranked somewhere like wide receiver 24, wide receiver 25, which is where I have him in my dynasty rankings. But we're seeing on Keep Trade Cut, he's up to wide receiver 17. And I think a lot of this, and there'll be people in the chat saying, yo, Theo, you got to talk about the offensive line injuries, because that's what you have to do with the Chargers offense, where you have to point out Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, these like all-pro type offensive tackles who are not playing. I get it. But Ladd McConkey, there was like no production in some of those games. And I get it. The offense took a hit. But I do think that there is a argument to be made that a lot of his boost is offensive coordinator related. This is a Mike McDaniel effect where we're seeing Omarion Hampton steam up. We're seeing Ladd McConkey steam up. And we're seeing all this optimism about Justin Herbert. What I think is interesting is Oronde Gadsden is a tight end. He's going to play. Then you've got David Njoku rumors where he's going to potentially sign. And they signed Charlie Kolar. And they signed the fullback Alec Ingold. I think Mike McDaniel is going to use a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 2 tight end sets, amplify this run game. And I think it's going to be a lot of 2 wide receiver sets in LA. I think for Ladd McConkey, that could end up being a huge win because the fullback's on the field, maybe a blocking tight end, more of a consolidated target tree and a great offense. But Alan, is there a chance that his snap share is a little bit lower than we want to see for an alpha? And you see guys like Trey Harris and Quentin Johnston being played, and you see Oronde Gadsden being a consistent target earner. And then they've got the army of running backs where it's not only Omarion Hampton, but Mike McDaniel seems enamored with Keaton Mitchell. Kamani Vidal was very good last year. For me, it's just a balanced offense where I don't think that Ladd McConkey is going to hit a wide receiver 1 season here. We've seen it with McDaniel where you saw, obviously, Tyreek Hill, which Ladd McConkey certainly is not. We also saw Jalen Waddle with a great deal of success, especially early on for McDaniel in Miami. So I get you could get burned here, but I feel like Ladd McConkey, to me, at wide receiver 17 is just a glaring sell. I see a couple trades that went down. I see a Zay Flowers plus Jalen Warren. Seems about right for that. I see a Ladd McConkey for a Quinshon Judkins, which obviously it's wide receiver running back. So again, maybe this is not supporting my thesis here. Then I see a Ladd McConkey in the 303 for the 105. That I can sort of get behind if you're getting access to potentially a Jordan Tyson type for a Ladd McConkey. But I'll give you a little bit of head-to-head. Ladd McConkey is 1 spot ahead of Jordan Tyson, 2 spots ahead of Luther Burden, 3 spots ahead of Rashee Rice, 4 spots ahead of Devonta Smith. I can get with kind of any of those players for Ladd McConkey in a trade right now. Where are you at with him?
Yeah, Ladd McConkey, over the last year, he's gone as high as wide receiver 13, as low as wide receiver, I think it was 19. So that, to me, shows that the market wanted to push him up into the wide receiver 1 tier after that great rookie season, but was never sure enough to do what they did with George Pickens. They're like, all right, you're going into wide receiver 11, wide receiver 9. That's happening with you, right? it's hard for people to see the upside. Now, I like that you brought up Mike McDaniel, their new offensive coordinator, because it was the most consolidated target tree that we saw in football, but with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in Miami. But was that at a necessity? It seems like there's so many different weapons right here, and you just went through the whole list, right? Like, this could be a 4-target. Like, if Vlad McConkey gets 4 targets a game, you're not going to be surprised. If he has an 11-target game, you're like, oh yeah, we saw that at his rookie season. So I agree with you that I don't see much difference between Pickens and Lad McConkey, but the narrative is that there's more upside for Pickens, and that Lad McConkey is what he is at this point. He's going to fall in. He'll have some wide receiver 13 years. He'll have some wide receiver 30 years. Right? It's just there's that huge flat tier of wide receivers. So yeah, it's always like sell him for what? And I agree with you. At this time next year, Lad McConkey, I mean, can you really sell like Zay Flowers right now? Is that someone that people are like trying to get onto your roster? And what I mean is, like, it's a boring name. Lad McConkey at least still has some cachet left over from where he was. And at this time next year, next offseason, Theo, that he might just be another boring wide receiver. So I like getting out. You're not going to get the iron price for him, but if you can get into a player, you just talked about Judkins, someone that has a little bit more of like dynasty, like sexiness to him, even if it's a lateral move, you don't have to like win the trade. And you talked about maybe getting into the rookie tier. I like this as a dynasty sell. I don't think a lot of people are talking about Lad as a sell. This is a good one.
Yeah, and I talked about him sort of as a player that I feel like is almost a purgatory pick in best ball and also in redraft, where is he going to hit like that high? When I'm drafting a player that's wide receiver 17 in like a best ball or redraft, I want a player who's got a ton of room to run and maybe finishes like wide receiver 6, 7 in that range. I want him to really crush it. I just think it's going to be a little bit more balanced in LA. A lot of the touchdowns are going to go to Omari and Hampton. But I think there could be a little bit more like a situation where Rondé Gadsden ends up being a winner, Trey Harris ends up being a winner, Quentin Johnson ends up being a winner, and Lad is like the guy who just sort of is like, okay.
Lad McConkey or Makai Lemon in Dynasty. If you have Lad, would you get out of him for Lemon?
I would.
That's like, you would.
I would trade him for Makai Lemon. I'll take the new hotness over
the
one that couldn't score for 6 games. And I think if you look at the prospect profile, I think Makai Lemon was, and people are going to get at me for this one. They're going to say, "Yo, Theo, do you watch SEC ball? That Georgia team was loaded. They had Brock Bowers, but if you compare the production as collegiates and the draft capital, Makai Lemon, 20th overall pick, Lad McConkey, early second rounder. It's a difference. It's a little bit of a difference there. And Lad never had that sort of production as a collegiate. Makai Lemon was Biletnikoff Award winner, dominating the Big Ten there. So I get it. Let's talk about another, and I saw one trade in that Dynasty Data Lab. So many Dynasty sites out there. Shout out Dynasty Daddy as well. But Dynasty, we love it.
More.
Dynasty Data Lab. I saw one trade in there that I loved, where it was a 2027 second and Lad McConkey, and they traded for Drake London. That's a trade. That's the one. You trade the appeal of 2027 second. You get rid of Lad, and you tier up in a major way to Drake London without using a first-round pick. I don't think that's available in too many leagues, but if your Drake London manager somehow thinks these guys are close enough, they're not. Drake London's a proper alpha, lacks target competition outside of Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. That's a slam dunk trade. I don't think that's reflective of the market everywhere, but it did get done in this person's trade. Alan, we talked about how there's a lot of dynasty sources out there now. You've got a very cool new venture over on Sirius. Why don't you share with the Dynasty Life crowd what you're doing?
If you're watching this show, you love Dynasty Fantasy Football. And if you have Sirius Satellite Radio in your car, on an app, and you can get free trials, we do the first ever 100% Dynasty Fantasy Football show on Sirius. You might be thinking, I listen to podcasts, I listen to YouTube all the time. There's tons of Dynasty stuff on there. There is a lot of great content still on satellite radio. Oh, there you go. There's the one with with Mike Dempsey coming up. And Theo, you've been on the show. You're going to be coming back on.
Some people have said that I was the best guest you've ever had. I've heard that rumor, but you've had some great guests, Alan.
Well, no, you're the 101. That's not even in dispute.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
There's GOAT tier, and then there's everything else. When we talk about NBA basketball, we talk about Michael Jordan, and then we just put that aside and have the other discussion. But yeah, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, if you have satellite radio, Channel 87, the Dynasty Hour will be doing it from now until July 4th.
Yeah, and we love it. Alan, you're such a good host, but it's also you're amplifying Dynasty sort of to the masses out there. And I know that you've done this for a long time over at RotoWire on the podcast side, but it's great to see Dynasty. We've had Heath Cummings on here. He's doing it on CBS. You're doing it on Sirius. Dynasty's growing and growing because it's an unbelievable way to play fantasy football. So big shout out to you for your new venture. And I can't wait to go back on with you in June. Make sure you check that out. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Let them know the channel, Alan, one more time.
Channel 87 if you're on the traditional dial on satellite, or if you go to the SiriusXM app, just search the Dynasty Hour. You'll find it.
And let's talk about another sell that you have. And this is a really interesting one because Kenneth Walker was unbelievable down the stretch, unbelievable in the NFL playoffs. The injury to Zach Charbonnet, we sort of saw what Kenneth Walker was capable of doing when he had the backfield to himself. Ends up winning the Super Bowl MVP, goes on the free agent marketplace, and ends up in one of the best landing spots available, the Kansas City Chiefs, who seemed to really embrace him, gave him a really good amount of money, so he gets the nuts landing spot, comes off a Super Bowl MVP award, and now the market has steamed him up. He's running back 9 overall on Keep Trade Cut. And I had this discussion with Evan Silva over on Fantasy Football Daily. Like, he's starting to touch the 1-2 turn in best ball and redraft. His ADP right now on Underdog, 15.9, Alan. Yeah. So, like, Kenneth Walker has steamed up like crazy, and you're considering selling him.
Yeah, now I said at the beginning, I'll just reinforce it one last time. This is what I'm doing. I'm not telling you what to do, right? I don't give advice. I just tell you what I'm doing. Follow along if you want. Tell me, don't if you don't. I drafted Kenneth Walker his rookie year in my Dynasty leagues ahead of Drake London. You remember that debate? It was Walker or London at the 102. Who was 101 that year, Theo?
That was Breece Hall.
Breece Hall, right.
Yep.
So I just, I've been regretting it ever since. And I was a little loud about it, and I was like, okay, this has been the wrong decision. Finally, I have an opportunity to get out. Now, it might be getting out before the boom, but I have an opportunity. I bet you right now you could trade Kenneth Walker in Dynasty for Drake London. I bet you that trade's available because everyone needs running backs in Dynasty. Nobody has them. Everyone's like sticking Jaylen Warren or Kenneth Gainwell in their number 2 spot. I'm not saying like it's in every league, but this is my opportunity because I've been burned by this pick at the 102 when a lot of smart people like yourself were saying, take Drake London, and I didn't listen. This is my out right here. His sentiment is higher. I mean, this time last year, Kenneth Walker, I'm assuming he was like RB 15. Like nobody really wanted him. If you took him over Breece Hall, which I did in one draft too, in a startup, that was laughable. So at this point, Walker is finally in the top 10 in the Dynasty consensus rankings. Even if his production is like, a top 7 or 8 RB this year, this is the one chance I'm having to get off the highway for a real asset. Yeah, Chris Olave in a second, I traded him for. Drake London, I'm trying to trade him for. So that's the case to get out on Walker in Dynasty.
I offered Kenneth Walker to the Jadarian Price drafter and a 2027 first, which he turned down in about 30 seconds. But I think tearing down from Kenneth Walker, getting another running back who's you can put in your lineup and a pick makes some sense. I can understand if I have a loaded roster. Like I have one team where I actually acquired Kenneth Walker. I had my team is an absolute juggernaut. I won it last year, overwhelming favorite this year, single QB format, and I did move a 2027 first for him because I needed an extra running back for the stability. But I could see that one burning me as well. I think with Walker, we haven't seen a player of his magnitude attached to an Andy Reid offense since Kareem Hunt. It's been a slew of running backs who have been opportunistic RB1 types in the offense, where Isaiah Pacheco had like a top 15 season. Jerick McKinnon, years before that, had an unbelievable second half of the year. So we've seen running backs who are lesser talents and less bell cow profiles thrive for short periods of time in this offense. I do think there's some soul searching going on with Kansas City this past offseason where they missed the playoffs. They pick in the top 10. They put a lot of emphasis on the defensive side of the ball in the NFL draft. And then they signed Kenneth Walker. So I think there's a chance that this looks like a ridiculous conversation.
No,
and
no,
Walker
he's going to be good. Walker's going to be good, but this is the chance to get out. I said because once he's really good and he blows up and he's like RB2 after 4 weeks, you're not going to want to sell, right? Like you're just going to be like, I want to hold him. So if you want to, and again, tearing down Theo, I mean, sure, that's fine. I meant like getting out for like a stable, boring asset. Drake London qualifies. You can name Chris Olave. He probably qualifies. I just meant if you want it out for 4 years like I have, this is the chance.
Yeah, it's definitely a golden window. You've had a couple of months, and everything sort of, we both think he's going to do great this year, but if he delivers a running back 15 season, that's a huge loss at this price. I'll say that the one thing that's a little annoying to me, and people are going to laugh at this one in the comments. They're going to say you're actually paying attention to day 3 running backs. But I think Andy Reid likes Emmett Johnson. And likes Emmett Johnson means he's probably the direct handcuff. But is there a scenario where Emmett Johnson catches 35 passes this year? Not something insane, but he's the pass catching back and he catches 30 to 35 passes. And that takes directly away from Kenneth Walker. And Kenneth Walker maybe catches, a lot of those passes clearly would have gone to Walker. Brashard Smith, I think, is way less of a threat because of Emmett Johnson, but he did have, I believe, 20-plus receptions last year as a rookie. So, does Emmett Johnson catch 30, 35 passes and sort of take Kenneth Walker's season from being the RB4 and instead he's the RB14 from losing that PPR value? I don't know. I'm just, in the back of my mind, I see that scenario.
Do you remember when Andy Reid said Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the next Brian Westbrook? I'm throwing. He needs 2 wins in a row with comparisons before I give Andy Reid any credit for liking Emmett. But your point is solid, though, right?
He said Shady McCoy. He said a little Shady McCoy there. So
right. So he already did Brian Westbrook. Andy Reid, you're 0 for 1. I'm betting against you on this one.
And I'll hedge this one. I think this is roster context for me. If I have a loaded top 3 roster, I'm heading into the season with Kenneth Walker, and I'm rolling with it. I'm putting him in the running back spot, and I'm saying, go ahead, Andy Reid. Let's go win a title. If I have the 6th, 7th, 8th, maybe 5 through 8, then I'm going to consider what can I get. And I know you say trade him for a more stable asset. I would consider a tier down, maybe get access to those 2027 first-round picks. But, Alan, the sacrilege here. One thing you have listed is 2027 first, which is people are going to turn off the channel. They're going to unsubscribe here. You actually suggest trading a 2027 first.
Yeah, I mean, 2027 first. Usually you have to wait until the draft gets closer and the prospect season and all the content comes out about it for those picks to realize value. I've never seen where the picks of a year out are worth more than the picks in the current year. That's certainly the case. If I'm like a non-playoff team, I'm talking about like a bottom 6 team, and they're saying collect those picks. And usually when everyone's going one way, the correct fantasy football strategy is to go the other way. And I think that you sell those picks, right? Because can you get a Puka Nacua for a 27 first? If I finished in the 4th to the bottom last year, Theo, and I knock on and I'm trying to rebuild my team, can I go to a playoff team that has, Puka Nacua, put my 27 pick on the table and just get him straight up? Because there's some negativity, even though Puka's value is still high in the consensus rankings, there's been some negativity about him in the news. So I'm just saying, instead of saying, hey, through my cold dead hands, hodl, I'm saying that go into the market, and I think you can get into these elite players. Jamar Chase. People look at the age on there, right? Oh, he's not 23 anymore, right? So he's old in Dynasty. I'm not saying just go trade your 27 first for CD Lamb, who were, like you said, he could age gracefully. I love that terminology you said for him. But can you start getting to some of these Malik Neighbors types? Like, if you're a bottom 5 team, Theo, would you trade your 27 first right now for Malik Neighbors straight up?
Yes, I think I would.
And it's possible.
I think that's where I'm at. And I think I could get burned by only one name, which is Jeremiah Smith. When you're looking at the problem with 2027 first is, I think that this is the year where a bunch of quarterbacks go in the first round. So if you're in a super flex league, you might be giving up a quarterback who you plug in for 5 years. And I know we don't play Dynasty like that, Alan. I'm not able to see the future. but I do think there's a situation where maybe the top 2 picks in the NFL draft are quarterback. Third overall pick is the best wide receiver of all time, prospect-wise, in Jeremiah Smith. But I get it. If I'm able to turn the optimism of 2027 into an asset that I shouldn't be able to get straight up, then I'm going to consider it. I don't think that trade's out there, but I do think you could end up getting an unbelievable player in a Superflex league. If you've got a roster that's not that great, you could get a tremendous player. So,
but are you really going to care, Theo, if Lenore Sellers goes to the Jets? I mean, like, who gives a crap, right? Like, fine, it's going to be good if you have to make the pick, but if you could take that pick now before it's even realized and turn it into one of these elite guys who's been a little depressed because of whatever news, Malik Neighbors, the recovery is going a little slow. I do think those trades are out there right now. Every podcast I watch yours, I watch all the guys on Fantasy Points, I watch them across the, and they just say 2027 picks. This is the Mashiach right here, right? Like this is what you need to collect. And Malik Neighbors, he's held his dynasty value. I'm exploring these, and that's why I'm selling my 2027 first, knowing there's 2 ways to get burned on this pick. Jeremiah Smith, you're dead if you do that. And also, let's say you acquire Neighbors for what the Smith pick is. You didn't lose that much, right? I mean, is there really going to be that much of a difference?
I think that there's a chance that when we get to it, I think Kawan Lacey, the running back, I mean, not to get to 2027, but I think Lacey, out of Ole Miss, there's a chance that he's a Jeremiah Love level prospect, like straight up. Like that'll be a conversation throughout the year. So you might get, but I get it. It's the way that I think that you handle 2027 first is you find the managers who are overvaluing them, and you could potentially profit in that way, like Alan is suggesting. And then you also find the managers who are not quite understanding what they're holding, which if you're trying to get 2027 first, I think now is the time to go for it, because as we get closer to the college football season, they're going to get more expensive. So I think you can play both sides of the market here, and you can kind of take what Alan's saying, try to see if you could get a remarkably good asset. And I think you could take what I'm saying and take an asset that is someone in the wide receiver 2 land, like a locked-in wide receiver 2, like we talked about, a Lad McConkey and a second to get a 2027 first. I think that kind of trade could end up paying off. So I see what you're saying, Alan. I think it's a dangerous game we're playing. We'll continue the dangerous game here. Let's talk about a player that another sacrilege type guy for you, Luther Burden, who Burden just feels like he could explode this year and have an unbelievable year. It's almost like it's like criminal not to include him in year 2 breakout discussion, where everybody's talking about what year 2 player could come and be like a league winner. Like, it starts off with Burden because it's the tantalizing upside, Ben Johnson offense, DJ Moore is now a Buffalo Bill. There's just so much to like here, but you have some reservations here.
I just don't know how all of the receivers are going to get there consistently, and they're being drafted, especially Luther Burden, in any format like it's already happened. So I'm just making the bet that against it. I'm like, everyone else is running the into the wind. I'm going to run with the wind at my back. The best, you have Colston Loveland, right? He's like the dynasty tight end 3 or 4 in most rankings. You have Roma Dunze, who was having his breakout before he got hurt. Last year, he had 5 or 6 games of dominant performance. Maybe it was a month, and then Burden, right? Like, it almost reminds me of a very rich man's Kadarius Toney. Not the same player, but we saw these like electric on the field moves, and we're like, wait a second, the under the hood metrics that you guys talk about all the time at Fantasy Points line up with a couple things we saw on the field, but. All of this points back there. There's no way that all 3 of those guys can get there. They're all 3. When I talk about Loveland, Roma Dunze, and Luther Burden. It might be frustrating when we have to set our lineup. 1 week it could be one week it could be the other. And we're going to have those pop weeks. But Luther Burden specifically, I'm seeing in my dynasty leagues across them, he's being treated like he is the next guy to break down the door of the elite tier. And that's usually a dynasty sign that you can cash out. Again, you hear a lot about tier down or tier cross position. I think that he's one of the players right now that's hot that can get you in to the JSN conversation. At least get you to the table with it, right? Like a lot of times you have JSN and somebody puts like two garbagey wide receivers on there, or they put, assets that you don't want. You throw Luther Burden on the table, okay, I'm listening now. I want to talk to you. So that's why it's an uncomfortable sell.
Yeah, we're seeing a bunch of these trades listed over here, right, if you're watching this on YouTube. And it's a really interesting player because you're seeing him used as a tier up to really elite assets. I think there's been conversation, certainly on this channel, if you watch like the Dynasty Points guys, like Jacob Sanderson has made arguments for taking him at like the 102, 103 in this year's rookie draft. Like Carnell Tate drafted 4th overall. He's the wide receiver 1 in the offense. He checked the Carnell Tate drafter with an offer of Luther Burden for Carnell Tate. I don't think that they're hanging up the phone. I think there might be a counter from some people. They might want Luther Burden plus, but it's just a cleaner asset because of the target competition. Ben Johnson is a kingmaker. We know that he's a offensive coordinator where like he's got receipts and receipts and receipts. The running back position is clear in Chicago. DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monungai battling it out, probably Swift. Colston Loveland, a foundational asset. He's tight end 3 for a reason in Dynasty rankings. And if you want to trade Trey McBride to get Colston Loveland plus, that trade's not even available everywhere because the enthusiasm for Loveland is so high. But then you've got Burden, where Rome Odunze was really good for the first month of the season, for 6 weeks. He was a top 10 pick. So he's got Loveland, Odunze, and Burden. Is there a scenario where 6 months from now, 2 of those players gain dynasty value and one of them loses some dynasty value? I think there is.
I mean, all 3 of them can lose dynasty value because they're going to be frustrating to own. There's just, we talked about the unlikelihood of 2 pass catchers being in the top 12 in any given year does happen. But imagine 3, right? Like, how could all 3 of these guys get home unless Caleb Williams throws for 5,000 yards? And I mean, Chicago, it's already tough enough to play after Thanksgiving in Chicago, and I love Caleb Williams. He's the answer to all of these things, right? Like, if you can get Caleb Williams somehow, maybe the window's already passed on that. But Luther Burden, it's not often that you see a player that hasn't done it yet spike like this, and generally, if it's the right move is to sell him. Now, if he has 2 good weeks in a row, you're going to feel horrible. So I don't recommend you do it. If you don't have real dynasty stones, if you don't have, if you're not okay being wrong, then you don't make this move. But when a player hasn't done it yet and that every podcast likes them, this is usually the signal to make a move.
I think for me, wide receiver 19 for Burden is an appropriate price tag for Dynasty. But I think that when we see wide receiver 19 on Keep Trade Cut, that's not reflective to like the Burden enthusiasts. They think that that's a ridiculous number. They'd probably rank him a little closer to like
14.
The wide receiver 14, wide receiver 12 range even. And I think the interesting pivot is Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, where I get 2 guys who are top 10 picks. They were top 10 picks recently. And I think that conversation gets started with Luther Burden. So he's really interesting. Let us know in the comments how ridiculous this one is.
Well,
or
Theo,
are you down with potentially kicking the tires on a trade?
Yeah, no, I think that you appropriately titled this video uncomfortable sells. These are not players we dislike and we want to sell because we think they're cratering. These are players that from my perspective, that may not realize the value. They're already being valued as if they've done it. And then what we've seen is that we'd like to see 1 or 2 years before they've been a made man, right? Like, we don't usually anoint these guys until they've done it for 2 seasons in a row. But I just think he could be this is, like I said, a way up or a way to get off. But man, any of these could burn you because the upside is there, and that's why these are exciting players and uncomfortable sells.
Yeah, and I'll talk about a player that it's not really an uncomfortable one, but I think we have an optimism window with George Kittle, where I started getting a couple of George Kittle trade offers for my George Kittle shares and trades involving George Kittle over the weekend because we had some positivity about his recovery. It's a little cleaner than maybe we thought it would be. And George Kittle, there's some optimism in San Francisco. He's going to come back maybe a little sooner than later. We still think he'll miss probably half the year, 8 games, but he could come back full strength is sort of the optimistic reports from some of these beat reporters. he's still tight end 13 on keep trade cut. And there's people out here saying, Theo, like George Kittle, this is the man. But 32-year-old coming off of yet another injury. For me, Mike Evans is now on the offense. It's just, is George Kittle ever going to give us an edge here? And tight end 13 ever going to give us a massive edge again, I should say. He's given us an edge for years and years and years. That's why it's uncomfortable. But we've seen sort of how the fall has happened with Travis Kelce, where Travis Kelce's just a cratering rock in terms of his dynasty value. He's down to tight end 27. Obviously, he's years older than George Kittle. But George Kittle at tight end 13, it gives me a player that I can tier up into a cleaner asset at tight end, or I can move him to a contending roster and get some viability back in terms of youth equity, maybe some pick equity. I feel like it's almost better to trade him before he comes back from injury, Alan, because of the optimism that the community still has on George Kittle being some superhuman level guy that's always going to bounce back. This one could burn me. And again, it's one of the, like when we say wide receiver 19, like we're talking about tight end 13. Like tight end 13 is down in like the what do we call it? Like the Badlands, like a Bruce Springsteen reference. It's like the Badlands. It's like a group of guys that you can always acquire a tight end 13, but we're on the fringe of tight end 1 land. And because of the nostalgia of what George Kittle's been able to do for us for so many years, I mean, he's really on the Mount Rushmore of dynasty or fantasy football tight end producers. I just think this might be the window to sell while injured, with the optimism that he's going to return and be George Kittle. He's getting older. He does have contract insulation. The franchise loves him to death, but he turns 33 early this season. You're talking about a 33-year-old tight end who's still ranked tight end 13. Your thoughts on that? And this is the quote. John Lynch, the general manager of San Francisco, said that George Kittle is doing well from his recovery from a torn Achilles. He's going to be ready at some point, if not for the first game. Give me a break with first game, Alan.
I agree with most of the analysis that you gave here, but the only thing is, I think that you forgot this is uncomfortable dynasty sells. This should be uncomfortable dynasty buys. I agree with everything you said for the buy reason, Theo.
Well, there we go. So we're butting heads, and it just goes to show you, like, so I'll say Brett Whitefield has been sort of on the anti George Kittle, comes back strong, thinks he could end up being a little dustier than anticipated. I've sort of been on that. I still have a Kittle share or two. I'm not completely out of the Kittle business, but if you're in a league with me and you hear this and you want to come buy him, I am open-minded to tiering to a younger tight end. I'll throw out just some options here. Is there a way for me to move George Kittle plus and get Eli Stowers and get a long-term asset? Are you interested in that one, Alan, or is that just preposterous to you?
No, I mean, George Kittle, I think that he's an uncomfortable dynasty sell, but I think you got to wait for the news to get better, right? Like some Ian Rappaport quote about, I mean, because that's what dynasty is, right? Like you have to play the news cycle. The news, now that everyone gets notifications on their phone 10 seconds after they're released, this is the edge in dynasty. So that's a good piece of news. So you have momentum. But if you throw George Kittle up on the block, for example, in your dynasty league, you're going to get 0 offers, right? Like
we see one trade here from Dynasty Data Lab. This is sort of, and you can already tell what these managers' rosters look like. George Kittle and DK Metcalf for Eli Stowers and Travis Hunter. So obviously it's the younger roster that wants to take on. I'm guessing that this is a roster context thing. You take on the two guys who are 28, a 28-year-old and a 32-year-old. You get a little bit of utility out of DK Metcalf, wide receiver 3 land. You get George Kittle coming back, hopefully giving you top 10 tight end production. And you get rid of Travis Hunter, maybe the headache this year with him. And I think both managers from this deal sort of walking away thinking that they got the best deal here. I might take the Eli Stowers side and go with the new hotness at tight end. I think Alan might take the George Kittle, DK Metcalf, and that's why Dynasty is awesome. Here's one for you, Alan. Isaiah Likely, who's 26 on the nose, in New York. You got Malik Neighbors on the mend for maybe 6 weeks of the year, and Malachi Fields was the probable wide receiver 2 of the future, which is not a really massive target earner. Isaiah Likely or George Kittle, they're head-to-head on Keep Trade Cut right now. tight end 12, tight end 13. Who you taking?
I think I would take Kittle, but knowing when I take him that he may not actually be himself until Thanksgiving, right? But what we do know about these all-time tight ends, you appropriately put him on the Mount Rushmore, top 4 tight end of all time with fantasy, that these guys seem to last, right? Like Tony Gonzalez, he was like 38 years old. So if that holds, I mean, Gronk was the only all-time guy that left football early. Travis Kelce, we're seeing still productive enough to start every week. So I think that Isaiah Likely, unlikely to ever be a top 12 tight end more than a couple spike weeks, could be wrong, but I'm not going to let the age here deter me. I still like the all-timer because if he does last another 3-4 years, like you said, we could all be dead in 3 years and not being playing Dynasty anyway. So we might as well take the guy who at least has a chance to give us elite upside, and that would be Kittle.
And I might go with the new hotness of Isaiah Likely in New York, and I've been a Likely truther for years. So, and we're seeing on the screen Kittle for Likely straight up, trade went down. Kittle for Likely and a fourth, trade went down, and another Kittle for Likely straight up. Then we saw on the flip side a Kittle and Michael Pittman Jr. for Isaiah Likely trade. So like the Isaiah Likely George Kittle trade scenario we just threw out there. Obviously, people using this KTC, and I have Isaiah Likely ranked ahead of him in my tight end rankings over at fantasypoints.com. You can go check them out. You can also get Ryan Heath's Dynasty rankings, Thomas Tipple's Dynasty rankings, John Hanson's Dynasty rankings. We are deep in the Dynasty rankings game. I'm doing a huge update right now on all my positional rankings. That should drop sometime this week. We're recording this on Tuesday. I have Carnell Tate really high up there. Wait till you see where I have him ranked, Alan. Let's talk about one more of my guys, and then we'll get to your final guy. And I talk about him all the time here, and I still have shares of him. I traded some last year, but it's Bucky Irving. And this is like kind of like the coach speak doesn't align with what I've seen Tampa Bay do. So Tampa Bay hires Zach Robinson from Atlanta. Robinson coming over from the McVay coaching tree, did a stint in the ATL, and now he's traded for greener pastures in Tampa Bay. Robinson was like the hot offensive coordinator name. Mixed results in Atlanta, I think we could say. Bijan Robinson obviously hit. Drake London hit. So we've had some hits for Zach Robinson. Comes over and says that Bucky Irving can do everything that Bijan Robinson can do. And we are going to use them in these awesome ways. Bucky Irving is currently running back 13 on Keep Trade Cut. I don't like the Kenneth Gainwell signing. I don't like them bringing in a prolific pass-catching running back. Some might say an opportunistic pass-catching running back last year in Pittsburgh. That was sort of what Pittsburgh did, was dump down to Kenneth Gainwell. But you signed Kenneth Gainwell as the Rachaad White replacement. Sean Tucker's back. I've got Bucky Irving where he still has youth on his side, where Bucky Irving is less than 24 years old. He turns 24 years old during the NFL season. Missed a lot of time last year. Was really high volume guy at the beginning of last year. I think it's fine. I just think this is an eye of the beholder player, sort of like McConkey. If people in your league are viewing Bucky Irving as a guy who's running back 15 level player and as a strong running back too, then you might not get that big cash out option. But if people are valuing Bucky Irving as a potential mid-tier RB1 type, where some people have him ranked there in Dynasty, Allen, then I'm selling Bucky Irving. I think he also should be treated a little bit, this is a weird one, a weird take, but he should be treated like a little bit more like the older running backs, because even though he's 23, we've already seen him miss time, and he's a little bit smaller. I think we've been spoiled by guys like Kyron Williams, who have been able to take volume for a few years here, James Cook for a few years here, where the lighter BMI backs have had that. But Bucky Irving, it started sort of like last year, he had trouble getting back on the field. Now he's back this year. For me, I just think a year from now, is he going to be ranked higher than running back 13 or lower? I'd take the under. So I'm open-minded to trading him. Where are you at on Bucky?
I'll give you two things that for this Bucky Irving thing. He was a sell high on a couple videos I did last year when he was a second-round pick in redraft, and he was a top 10 or 12 running back. So I'm still with you here. You and I did bold predictions. One of my bold predictions was Kenneth Gainwell, who they signed for about $7 million a year, will outproduce Bucky Irving this year, and that Kenneth Gainwell is not the Rachaad White replacement. He's the Bucky Irving replacement, and Bucky Irving is the Rachaad White replacement. So that's how I'm treating this backfield, and I'm giving it about a 40 to 50% chance that it plays out that way. I'm almost convinced that this is a minimum of 50-50 a split. And what do we see? Last year at this time, Kenneth Gainwell, everyone just thought of him as like some roster clogger running back where you just like throw him on the end. He could, come on and off waiver wires in shallower leagues. But he just pushed Jaylen Warren out of the way once he got that opportunity in that overseas game. This is a real problem for Bucky Irving, and like you properly outlined, we haven't seen him do it for multiple years, the undersized. I like Bucky Irving, but he was like a dynamic pass catcher at Oregon, like not really, this between the tackles guy for an NFL. So I'm with you. I think that if you could still sell Bucky Irving and there's deals out there that you think are fair, I would take it. This is why last year he was a player that not only I wanted off my roster, because I got him in the 4th round of rookie drafts, no problem. Everything's a profit. But I would be scared to death of him this year.
Yeah, I think it's again, if you have a chance to cash out in a big way, go for it. I don't know if I'm necessarily as much doom and gloom about his outlook for this season. I still think he's going to have utility, but I do think I agree with you in the sense that Kenneth Gainwell is going to be a little bit of a headache, especially in the pass catching department. People expecting Kenneth Gainwell's work to the guy was top 5 in running back receptions last year and was finishing as their RB1 for like every week to end the season. The fact that he was a free agent and signed with Tampa Bay off of a career season, there's a little bit of an expectation of his at least utility in this offense. So a lot of mouths to feed in Tampa Bay as well. Very, very interesting player. I think if we look at the players surrounding Bucky Irving, there's a bunch of tenuous guys, but we did see in the trades that have went down, Bucky Irving is still looked at as a foundational piece in the tiering up trades. So we saw like a Bucky Irving for Rashee Rice, which I think is interesting. The one that I thought was interesting was Bucky Irving and the 105 for Jahmyr Gibbs went down. That's a smash pick for Jahmyr Gibbs for me. Bucky Irving and 3 second rounders, 227 seconds and the 209, which is essentially Jeremy Bernard, Antonio Williams, for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's a smash for the Amon-Ra St. Brown side for me. So you're still looking at him as a foundational piece of tier up trades, and I do think there's a chance you could tier down. I'm open-minded to tiering down from Bucky Irving and getting guys like Travis Etienne plus, which I think is out there, where I have the expectation of similar volume, if not better volume, for Travis Etienne. New Orleans offense could be closer to Tampa Bay than many Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans would like. So,
would you take David Montgomery in a 27-second for him?
No, I think I'd lean Bucky Irving in that one. Okay. I would want to squeeze out a little bit more, but David Montgomery is an interesting one because who's going to have more touches this year if they stay healthy?
I would take a bet, and I wouldn't even I would take plus odds if given to me, but Montgomery will have more fantasy points in 2026 than Bucky Irving.
Here's another one that's interesting. If I'm looking at win now this year, Christian McCaffrey is side by side with Bucky Irving. And it's crazy to me. I mean, is there a scenario where Christian McCaffrey, if he stays healthy, averages 7 more points per game than Bucky Irving this year?
Oh, I mean, dude, you're talking to a guy that thinks Bucky Irving is just like should probably be like RB25, RB20, something like that. So I'm probably not in my mind, I told you, Gainwell is going to be the preferred option in that backfield. I'm all doom and gloom with Bucky Irving. I'm very bearish.
You also seem to be bearish on one more sell you've talked about in the pre-show. You told me Makai Lemon is a player that you're considering selling. I mean, the new hotness, Alan.
Again, one of these players where, strike while the iron's hot. Uncomfortable sells, right? It's not fun to sell Makai Lemon. But, I mean, Jalen Hurts was one of the lowest volume passing quarterbacks in the NFL last year, and that's been a problem. Hopefully it gets rectified, and this take is cold, in week 2. But you have Devontae. I'm already gonna move AJ Brown out, right? I'm gonna pretend he's traded already. Devontae Smith, who a lot of smart fantasy people like yourself even think that he could take that JSN leap, become like a 10-target player a game. Then you have Dallas Goedert, who's still there, okay? Eli Stowers, who you just talked about, how you think he's, going to be one of the future pieces there. And Makai Lemon, and then Saquon Barkley, who's still going to be, a focal point of a heavy rushing attack. Jalen Hurts is going to take a few hundred rushing yards and third down pass attempts where he scrambles for, I know he hasn't been running as much, but I mean, all of that can't compute and Lemon be a top 25 receiver. So I'm not saying he's not a good player. I'm just saying that there's a very big danger by week 6 that, he's like one of the buy low podcast favorites because he hasn't been producing. Now, you need, again, uncomfortable sell, because if he ends up being the next Amon-Ra St. Brown, man, is this going to be a bad take? But uncomfortable sell. I think Lemon had some pre-draft steam. People like him. They like the landing spot. Theme here, Theo. I think, again, these are tier up players that you can take and go up to sure things. I use Drake London because he's a little bit boring. I use Chris Olave because, again, high upside player we've seen produce in the NFL. I'm always trying to get to players I know could do it, that maybe have a little age discrimination on them. Makai Lemon, again, uncomfortable sell, very scary. But by week 3, you might be thanking me that you got out now.
Yeah, I can't get with this one just because I think he's appropriately priced. He's like, the landing spot was not through the roof because he's the 3rd wide receiver selected in the NFL draft, but there's a delta of like 12 picks between him and Jordan Tyson.
Can I ask you something here, Theo?
Yeah,
because when AJ Brown's eventually traded on June 1st or 2nd, don't you agree Lemon goes from 25 to like wide receiver like 17?
I don't know. I had this conversation with Scott Barrett and Brett Whitefield. I think that the people are already pricing AJ Brown out because it's so many like of the main beat reporters saying that this is a done deal. Adam Schefter saying it's a done deal. I think like the Dynasty marketplace has already reflected it because we saw a bump for AJ Brown trades, and Lemon, I think he's just settled in. I think it's interesting is you're getting, again, you're on some smart analytical takes here where guys like Scott Barrett are a little worried about, and Brett Whitefield, 2 really smart guys over here at Fantasy Points, apprehensive about just how good Lemon's role can be with this offense because of Jalen Hurts' lack of success and lack of attempts passing to the middle of the field, where you need those Amon-Ra St. Brown, JSN type targets, the sort of the thesis for Lemon smashing. I'm sort of on the flip side. I think you're going to see a little bit of a change here in Philadelphia's offense based on what they just did in the 1st and 2nd round. I'm getting a little more, there's going to be a change here. A.J. Brown's moving on. You're going to see Saquon Barkley getting a little bit older, a lot bit older. And then you've got this potential to change. Coming off of a disappointing year in terms of where they finished, they're chasing teams like the LA Rams, chasing teams like the Seattle Seahawks, still in a Super Bowl window. And they add Makai Lemon and they add Eli Stowers, bang, bang, 1st, 2nd round. I think you're going to see some of these lower ADOT looks for Philly, and I think they're going to embrace it. So I think there's a chance that Lemon ends up hitting at this range. I will say that we did see some trades, Alan, that sort of support what you're saying, where Lemon still has equity out there. Like we saw Makai Lemon and Denzel Boston for CeeDee Lamb.
You could say, Theo, could say that I'm a little sour on Lemon.
Oh my God! I got to end the show right now with that one. That's painful. Let us know in the comments what you think about Makai Lemon. One trade that I think was interesting that we saw up here was a Makai Lemon Tetairoa McMillan trade, where it was Makai Lemon, I believe, and a 27 first and Tyreek Hill to go get Tetairoa McMillan, and that was going to be my very uncomfortable player to discuss as a sell here. And anybody who's followed my work over the last 2 years. Tetairoa McMillan has been sort of a player that I was pounding the table for. Last year, like during the rookie NFL like draft buildup, Brett, we saw people projecting Tetairoa McMillan to go in like pick 20 through 28 range. Brett Whitefield and I consistently said Tetairoa McMillan is going to be way more highly drafted than that. We had him very highly ranked in terms of the dynasty rankings, and I continue to have him ranked very highly. But wide receiver 9 on Keep Trade Cut for Tetairoa McMillan, and we're seeing trades like the one we just saw where it was like the 27 first Makai Lemon to get Tetairoa McMillan. Like he's being treated like almost not the god tier of wide receiver, but he's in that when you're ranked as wide receiver 9, you're a contender to be the wide receiver 1 overall. And when you are ranked ahead of George Pickens, you're ranked ahead of like a bunch of these guys who averaged a lot more points per game than you last year. It's just for me, it's just it's an optimistic, like very enthusiastic valuation for this player by the entire Dynasty marketplace. We're also seeing it in the best ball streets. McMillan came out and said he's going to play like 10 pounds heavier. He's going to play at like 215, 210 range. He feels much more comfortable there. I get it. He's putting a lot of work into his body this offseason. The vibes are outstanding. But is Bryce Young gonna be the kingmaker that puts Tetairoa McMillan as like a top 6, top 7 finisher in fantasy scoring? If I'm valued at the wide receiver 9 and I finish as the wide receiver 16, I've lost value here. And I get it. It's sort of a long-term play. But let's talk about some trades we're seeing. Tetairoa McMillan in a 2027 first goes and gets me Jamar Chase. I think I'm taking the Chase side. I'm taking the Chase side easy. I see a Tetairoa McMillan in the 105 for Jameson Williams in the 103. And I'm assuming with this trade, considering this is 2026 picks, the 103 was Mendoza, and the 105 ended up being a wide receiver. So I ended up getting a Jameson Williams who could outscore Tetairoa McMillan this year. I would bet on McMillan, but it's not like a 90-10 outcome here, Alan. This might be a 60-40 outcome for McMillan outscoring Jameson. And then I'm getting a quarterback versus a Makai Lemon, Jadarian Price. We see another one, Tetairoa McMillan, Parker Washington, Malik Willis, gets me Amon-Ra St. Brown. Probably on the Amon-Ra St. Brown side. So all I'm saying is, like, I love Tetairoa McMillan, but we've seen this story before. Reminds me a little bit of Garrett Wilson when Garrett Wilson was coming off of his Offensive Rookie of the Year season. He steamed up like crazy in Dynasty, and he actually touched the 1-2 turn in redraft that year. That was the Aaron Rodgers gets injured game 1 year where Wilson was like a rocket ship to the moon. But it reminds me a little bit about Garrett Wilson, where McMillan was a top 10 pick, Wilson was a top 10 pick. McMillan maybe is a little more alpha-ish because he's huge, but maybe he becomes Drake London. Maybe he doesn't become Drake London. I just think for me, I'm only including him here because wide receiver 9 seems like a high-end outcome for him. Your thoughts on this one? I hate even bringing up Tetairoa McMillan as a potential sell, but it's really just reflective to his market price right now.
See, I think this is a really good take, and I think this is a great player because you could do anything you want with Tet McMillan. You can use him, again, as we have in this podcast, in this video, to get up to the higher tier, or you could use him in a deal to get across positional, or you can go down. So I think that he's in the perfect spot where his name and his value are ascending, but there's a lot of reason for pessimism here. You laid out the case perfectly. I don't need to add on to it other than he's just, you know how I know I don't love Tet McMillan's? Because every time I'm playing best ball, every time I'm in a startup draft and he's sitting there on the board, I do something else. He never falls to a value, so his market is strong, right? And you're never reaching up for him because you don't have that belief in him, and he's got a Bryce Young problem. Well laid out the case, guilty as charged. You win the case there. I think he is like the perfect uncomfortable sell high.
Yeah, there's no greater truth serum in life than being on the clock in a fantasy football draft, and Alan sort of laid it out there. So let us know, how angry do these takes make you? Are you unsubscribing from the channel? We actually had a live on-air trade just go down. Trey Camberling just moved George Kittle for Terry McLaurin and Parker Washington. So the trades are happening all the time. Go ahead and go get some trades done. Make sure you're sticking with us here at Dynasty Life all offseason long. Make sure you're checking out Alan Seslowsky on Channel 87 3 days a week over on Sirius and over on RotoWire. And make sure you're also checking out Dynasty Points. They're dropping their content over here on Fantasy Points Dynasty YouTube. Make sure you're also checking out Fantasy Points YouTube. We're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your leagues this season.